Are you eager to discover C-level strategies aimed at accelerating RIA growth? Join us at RIA Edge Los Angeles, taking place at the Ritz-Carlton on October 7th and 8th. Register today by visiting riaedgela.com and save 10% with code WM2025.
Welcome to the WealthStack Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rosic, the Director of WealthStack Content Solutions. Today, we're diving deep into the future of wealth management and exploring how AI is transforming the advisor-client relationship. And who better to talk about it than John Bunch, CEO of Allworth Financial, a multi-billion-dollar RIA scaling rapidly by embedding AI into its growth engine. John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Shannon, for having me.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite topics to discuss, obviously. But before we get into the meat of the conversation, I actually want to start with your background. And I promise this will be the most difficult and challenging question you'll get this entire conversation, because I want to know, and our listeners want to know, what makes John, both personally and professionally?
Sure. So, I have had a very unique career in this industry. I've worked both here in the United States as well as I spent 3 years in London, England, in the financial services business. But I start by saying, listen, I'm a father first. I have 4 daughters ranging from 35 to 11 years old. So I have amazing children, wonderful wife. And I started in this industry about 36 years ago when Charles Schwab was a very small company. It's hard for my kids to believe, but I started actually before there was really an internet. And so I remember being a branch manager and having people lined out the door with clipboards and paper and a pen to open new accounts. Spent 14 years there, really kind of the glory growth years, I think, at Schwab. It's still a phenomenal company. And then I went to work for TD Bank, which was TD Waterhouse. I became the president of retail and really ran the front end of that business, marketing, sales, et cetera. And then I left in 2012 and went to work for private equity. When private equity first started to invest in the RIA world, I was the CEO of one of the largest companies back then, which was called the Mutual Fund Store, which was a bit of an odd name, but it was a $10 billion firm, rapidly growing. And I sold that to Financial Engines and joined Financial Engines, and we took it private into what is now Edelman Financial Engines. Then I left and went to Europe or to UK for a couple of years and came back, and 2 years ago joined as the CEO of Allworth.
All right. So girl dad and sitting on both sides of the aisle in our industry. So super interesting background. But, obviously you're a very busy guy outside of making things happen at Allworth. What are you doing outside of work?
So I am an avid outdoorsman, and I probably have one of the more unique hobbies of people you are going to interview. I love to ice fish. So imagine, being outside 20 below zero and you're drilling a hole through ice and trying to catch fish. It's usually not something you see a lot of people around you doing, but that's my passion. I've been doing it for a long time, and I fished all over the world. So.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I have done that once out here in Colorado up at Dillon Lake, and it's a blast. It's very therapeutic because you're just kind of out there with your warm drinks, and It's very peaceful. So, but where are you doing that in Texas?
Well, no, I'm in Dallas today. We have one of our major locations is in Dallas, so I'm down here visiting our team down here. But I usually do it actually in Northwest Ontario, Canada. So quite far north.
Oh, that's incredible. All right. So now we know where to catch you, especially during the winter. If you wouldn't mind, John, just give our listeners a quick overview of Allworth Financial and who you serve.
Yeah, sure. So, we'll start kind of the basics, which is Allworth Financial's $31.5 billion in AUM. Last year, I think when I joined, it was about 23. So we're growing rapidly. We're both a M&A integrator as well as an organic business. We really rely on both of those. It was founded 33 years ago by two, what I would call industry pioneers, Pat McLean and Scott Hansen. Started actually with a radio show in Sacramento, California, and that's grown to having locations in 41 markets across the states. And, we are not just a financial planning firm, but we also have a fairly large tax business. We did 6,000 tax returns last year. So we really believe in, kind of enabling technology to help grow both financial planning, investment management, and the tax business.
Well, I appreciate the background and the context, and I want to now dive into our first segment that I call Stats All Folks. So to really set the stage before we dive into Allworth's AI initiatives, let's take a little bit of a look at the broader RIA community and how it's approaching AI. because these figures really help underline why embedding AI into a firm's DNA isn't just innovative, it's become very strategic. So I came across a study by F2 Strategy that said 74% of wealth management firms now use AI, which is up about 23% just in the past 2 years, which obviously makes sense. And notably, 80% of those adopters are RIAs or hybrid RIAs. And I think what we can glean from these stats is that it's suggesting that AI is quickly becoming table stakes. So, in your view, what's going to separate the firms who simply have AI tools from those who turn it into a real competitive advantage?
Well, I think first is the hardest thing with AI, and we started this journey 2 years ago. We have over 40 AI projects that are kind of under scope and working in our firm today. And we really kind of look at this as a way to have a better client experience. I think a lot of the industry articles, et cetera, are about efficiencies and how to get more kind of efficient gains. We really look at it the other way, which is how do we use AI in order to have a better client experience, which ultimately helps with the advisor experience. And we've got tools like Jump AI, which is really kind of, you had a podcast on this, so your listeners should know. 85% of our advisors have adopted that, and it's basically saving them about 75% of the time it used to have post meeting. But really, I think the most important thing with that is it's a better client experience. A client is getting better notes taken on their account. The advisors can focus more on the client's needs and not worry about multitasking. And so, to me, what's going to separate folks in this space is not the adoption of AI, from a technology standpoint, but it's really the embracement and adoption internally of the workforce. And listen, we're not perfect. We've done some things on the AI front that are a bit like my 11-year-old will say, can I have a do-over when playing a game? But we've done things like, Chat GPT is something that's available to all of our employees. And it's really amazing to watch once you give smart, employees that are really focused on the bigger picture, these types of tools, what they can do. And it ranges everything from investment management all the way to our finance and HR departments. Everyone really is rowing the boat in the same direction and bought into the AI, what I would call revolution.
And a lot of firms are really just testing maybe a couple of solutions, especially around maybe like the low hanging fruit. But I don't want to breeze over the fact that you said that Allworth has more than 40 active AI initiatives running across the organization. That's a huge scope. So how did you decide to go that big and really that fast? And what does it take to manage AI at that scale without losing focus or even ROI?
Yeah, so great questions. So the first thing we did is we started an AI council. And so we built the infrastructure up front so that, one, we understood what we're actually going after as a firm. We knew that we wanted this to be employee driven as much as it would be kind of what I would call corporate driven. And the AI council has everyone from our technology department to our chief legal officer to advisors for people in different departments. And it really is meant to be the steering committee on what we should work on as a firm. And 40 sounds like a lot of projects, but the reality of it is 2 or 3 are the ones that I'm focused on that are what I call big economic drivers of the future. But there are things that are being done now in finance and other departments that are led by employees that are radically going to change how we do various kind of what I would call not mundane tasks, but repeatable tasks in the business. And so we want employees to use AI as a desktop tool and as an enabler. And frankly, I want to stay out of their way because, most of the best ideas in any company come from those that are doing the work, not from the C-level suite. And so that's really how we manage it.
So let's take it back a step further then. You establish this council, you launch it. How did you even have the foresight to say, okay, AI is hitting the scene, we need to get ahead of it, therefore let's create an internal culture around it?
Yeah, listen, I'm a bit blessed in a sense that I did start in this industry before, the web really took hold as a trend or as a tool. And, I was able to, I think, really take a step back with my management team and look at this and go, this is going to be bigger, in my opinion, than what the web has done for our industry. And I think that you can either be an early adopter here and stay on kind of your front foot and actually drive this, or frankly, I think you're going to get left behind. Because, my original thesis in this was, well, all of my vendors are going to build AI tools and I'll just kind of, ride their tails. And then I thought, well, that's a pretty big risk to take as a business, right? Relying on someone else to drive the strategic initiatives of your company. And that's why we formed kind of this whole focus on AI and pushed all the chips into the middle of the table and said, this is going to be a big deal for the firm. We also probably did something that's very different, Shannon, than most other firms. It is co-led by my CMO and my CTO. And so I wanted both business representation as well as technical representation. And, I'm, again, a bit blessed that I've got two leaders that actually do believe in the future of this and are realistic on, what really could happen both on a positive side and maybe not so positive side. That's really how we built the whole infrastructure here.
I need to talk to your CTO because we need to get them to one of our CTO think tanks that I host at our events to talk about these exact things with like-minded peers, but I'll table that for after this. Let's talk about some of the impact areas then around AI within your firm. Where are you maybe seeing, the biggest change when it comes to AI? Is it marketing? Is it the workflows? Is it, M&A integration? What does that look like? And maybe do you have a high impact example from those areas?
Yeah, sure. So about 2 years ago, we partnered with a company called Stack AI, and really we wanted to start to test what we could do internally in order to kind of improve processes. And I'll give you one example in kind of the investment management side, and then I'll talk a little bit about marketing because I think that's pretty interesting as well. So if you think about the life of an advisor, as the product set evolves in investing, it becomes harder and harder to stay on top of what would be the best actual product for clients and what's evolved in that product set. So we've used Stack AI to actually take all of the questions that come into our investment management team and basically build a AI agent that you can actually send in. You can sit at your desk and say, geez, I've got a client that's sitting in front of me that has real estate portfolios, that has a concentrated position in Apple, lay out 3 or 4 prompts, and it will show you based on your data input, what we think would be the best solution. And it's not just the answer, but it's the training materials, it's podcasts, it's videos on all of this. And basically what it's done is we've got 7 people in our investment department. It's really freed up one whole person worth of work a week in order to kind of actually focus on higher value activities. So the advisors win because they get better answers quicker. The investment team wins because they can think about other strategies to invest in. And, about 75% of our advisors are using that tool. It gets better every week, as you know, with AI. And I think that's just a real life example of how that works. On the non-advisor front, we're definitely using it on kind of how we think about marketing, how we think about building ads and or test A/B testing of various events. A lot of the things that used to be done kind of in a copywriter situation are now done by artificial intelligence. And again, our team is excited about it. And I think that's the big key, Shannon, which is if you talk about this openly and people get behind it, they'll make it successful. If it becomes this, corporate initiative that people are worried about their jobs or whatever it might be, you just have less of a chance of this being adopted. And for us, our culture is everything, and we want this to be embedded in our culture.
And I love that because it really comes from the top down and making sure that everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction, because it seems like you've really operationalized AI to reduce, as what we love to call, that swivel chair effect, right? And it's ultimately freeing advisors up to spend more quality time with clients. So I'm curious, how have you achieved that cultural buy-in, and what has the advisor feedback been, and how are you measuring it?
Yeah. So, we run the firm in a very simple manner, which is, we exist not only for our clients, but for our advisors. And so we have an advisor council that's a bit different in the marketplace. Usually advisor councils are the most senior people and that, have been around. Our advisor council has actually people from all walks of their career. So early adopters, early careers, mid-career, successful advisors are later in their career. And we want them to be really the people that are kind of shouting from the mountaintops on the things that we're doing in the firm. And the reason we do that is before we even go out into the marketplace with new ideas and initiatives, they really kind of give us guidance as a management team on, well, you know what, that's right, but this small tweak would actually make it even better. And so getting that advisor buy-in early is important. And the second one is, having worked for a lot of great CEOs in my life, um, measure, manage, and reward is a core, focus of my leadership team. And so we measure just about everything, because if you don't measure it, you have no idea what's happening in the business.
Isn't that the truth? And I've heard you actually say before, AI isn't tech for tech's sake, but it actually aligns with Allworth's mission and growth vision. So, how does embedding AI mesh with your scaling model while still preserving that high touch service that clients really expect?
Yeah, listen, this is not about replacing kind of what I think is at the core of all financial services, which is the relationship with the client. It's about enabling that relationship to be at a higher level and to focus on the things that matter most. And so, if we can use AI to take away some of the tasks that advisors have been done, like note taking, et cetera, and spend more time listening and in dialogue, that's a huge win for everybody. And I think that I don't really even think of AI as kind of a tech initiative, right? I think this is the business model strategy, whereas 10 years ago might have been, what are you going to think about from a Zoom perspective or, video conferencing? To me, this is just a business strategy that's going to enable all parts of our business. And, it just happens to be tech, but I don't really think about it as a CTO function that's being driven throughout the company.
Well, it's interesting because I've always said too that business strategy and tech strategy are now one and the same. They shouldn't be separated anymore. You have to look at it holistically. So I'm curious, what maybe AI solutions or AI enabled solutions are you actually most excited about right now?
Yeah. So I would say it's not really what is that we're working on today, right? I think, 2 or 3 years down the road, and I look at what this business and what the client experience could be and what we'll be able to do at a level that's never been seen before in this industry. And that's what excites me, right? Which is, I don't even think this is an evolution. I think this is a revolution, and really getting on the right side of this and getting employees to buy in, and then ultimately delivering a client experience that's far superior than they've seen today. That's really where I get excited. And that means, how do you take out tasks in the business that frankly are not value add from a people perspective? And then how do I use that savings to invest back in the business? This is not about margin expansion for me. This is about creating a better value proposition for both clients and frankly employees.
And I'm curious too, what's on the roadmap for Allworth, especially when it comes to these initiatives? You have 40. Is it if you nail one, you check it off the list, or are these ever evolving? Are you planning on adding more?
Yeah. So I have an internal slogan that I use with the team, which is fail fast, fix it, or ditch it. And, I think that if you look at this and adhere strictly to a roadmap and it's all about completing a project and checking the box, I think you're going to fail. I think this is about having the nimbleness to move around and find the right long-term answer here. And like I said earlier, we've done a couple of things that just haven't worked. And it's like, well, great. You know what? We were able to identify what doesn't work. Let's learn from it. Let's make sure the next project we do, we don't have the same problem. And a lot of it is about employee adoption, or it's just we've reached too far on the spectrum of change and we need to kind of back it up a bit. But that's kind of how we think about it.
All right. So what else is on the roadmap then for Allworth, even beyond AI initiatives?
Yes. So to me, it's about not just AI, but I think it's about automation in general, right? So if you think about our industry, it's still pretty labor intensive, right? I mean, when you think about paperwork, forms, all of the things that frankly are not great value adds for clients, that's where our next big focus is. And one of the reasons I'm in Dallas today is we've got a room full of people that I'm staring at right now that are with vendors that are looking at our entire business and automation from our business, not only what we can do here, but what we can do overseas. And, it's something that is being driven by employees. It's not, my initiative, but they're looking at it as, wow, if we could save time here, we could redeploy those resources somewhere else to have a kind of higher use of our talent. And so, to me, it's going to be about almost a full business remodel on how we kind of run our processes.
Well, very exciting. Like you said, you've seen exponential growth since you've joined. You have this AI council in place. So sounds like a lot of good things coming down the pike for Allworth. So congratulations on keeping it all on the rails and keeping it moving. But it is actually time for segment 2 of this episode, John, that I call Ask Us Anything. And I have actually gone out to the social universe and asked folks to submit questions they want answered by you. And we did have some listeners slide into the DMs this week. So if you're ready for it, I am going to put you in the hot seat.
I'm in.
All right. First question we got. You've had significant employee growth over the last year. How do you maintain company culture and ensure there's buy-in from everyone around firm initiatives?
Yeah, I think that is everyone's responsibility in a company, right? And I think that we are very intentional about our culture, right? We have a core set of values that, I care is what we call them, which I think tells you everything about Allworth. It was really kind of built on the foundation of Scott Hansen and Pat McLean's view of making sure they take care of employees as well as clients. And we make decisions around that. And sometimes the decisions are, intuitive, and sometimes the decisions are really, a result of decisions we've made as an executive team that doesn't necessarily work out. And so, we've done 43 acquisitions in the history of our company. It's really important that the people that we bring into the firm want to be with Allworth, and it's just not them selling their firm in order to get a capital appreciation event. And so, and again, I just think it goes down to try to maintain a flat organization. I try to talk to all employees at least once a year in small groups to really understand what's happening in the business. And we actually, quarterly survey our employees on how they're feeling about the health of the business. And we act against those results, and I report them to the board, and it's just part of our DNA.
Love it. So looking ahead, in your opinion, what's the one area of wealth management you think AI will completely transform, but maybe people aren't really talking about it just yet?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and probably a bit hard to kind of narrow down just one function of the business. But I think everyone is now focused on operational efficiency, right? I think it's going to be more about enhancing the relationship between the firm, the advisor, and the client, and what you're able to deliver at a certain level, right? So if you think about 25 years ago, knowledge was power, right? Because the knowledge was really concentrated on the advisor side. Today, knowledge is starting to kind of, propagate across the entire business. And for me, it's going to be really enhancing that client experience and frankly, delivering more than they ever thought was possible from a client perspective. And I think, that's the real value of artificial intelligence.
I would have to agree there. All right. I have one more question for you. And I actually chuckled a little bit when I saw this come through, especially when you talked about your daughter saying do-over, because we did have a question that was around what's been your biggest, maybe AI quote unquote fail that probably looked good on paper, but just never really came to fruition.
Yeah, we've stubbed our toe quite a few times, which I actually think is a success factor, right? I think if you don't fail, you're not pushing the envelope hard enough in your company. And so, we did an initiative around kind of meeting preparation and using Salesforce and some automation there. And, we got a whopping 15% adoption rate by our advisors. Well, that's probably not what I would consider a success factor there. And so for us, it is really looking at that adoption rate and the value creation curve for the clients. And so we're going to come back to it, right? We just wanted to learn why we didn't get it right the first time. And that's really where I would say is probably our biggest failure.
Well, I certainly appreciate you being put on the spot and your very insightful answers, John. But we have now come to our final and what might be my favorite segment that I affectionately call Stack It or Whack It. So I'm going to throw a few technologies at you, and be warned, they're not always wealth tech related, sometimes just random ideas I have. And you tell me if they are worth the hype or not. So stack it means you love it. Yep, use it. Whack it. No way. Lose it. That's insane. So first one that I have for you, embedded wealth tech by big tech giants. We've seen companies like Apple, Amazon, Google embed financial services into their customer ecosystems, but it does raise a few concerns about data privacy and anti-competitive behavior. Thoughts here, stack or whack?
Listen, it's hard to bet against the big tech companies, right? So let's just start there. I've been doing this 36 years. I've heard the same thing for probably 25 years that big tech's going to take over this industry. So I'm going to say whack it. I hope that they actually develop things that push our industry forward that would require all of us to get better. But I'm not necessarily worried about what you and I would consider the big tech companies on that front.
All right, one whack it is. Next one I have for you. Asset tokenization. The argument is that it could enhance liquidity, transparency, and accessibility, but there's still legal and technical challenges. Stack or whack?
I would say long term, probably stack. I think short term, it's not going to materialize for quite some time. But again, I think anything that will help the consumer or client long term, I'm for, but I don't think it's going to have an immediate impact.
All right. And last one for you. Now that I know you are an avid ice fisherman, I have to ask then, when it comes to maybe some camera work, sonar cameras for ice fishing, thoughts there, stack or whack, or do you just like to not know and hope for the best and go au naturel on the ice and fly blind?
Well, listen, we could spend 30 minutes on this conversation, so I'll make it quick. But for those fishermen out there, I think they'll get this. So for ice fishing, completely stack. I think for other types of fishing, I would say whack it, because I am worried about the conservation of various species that are hard to catch. And if you can use that technology, I think there's a high likelihood that you could have real damage in the ecosystem. And so to me, it's a bit of a balance, but I think used appropriately, fine. But again, if you ever want to have 30 minutes on this conversation, I would be happy to go into much more detail.
I mean, honestly, I kind of would, because now out of curiosity, I have to ask before we wrap up, are you using any type of technology when it comes to ice fishing?
Yeah, I absolutely use live target sonar. So the great part of it is you can actually see the fish swim in underneath you, and you can raise your lure or bait and watch them chase the bait when you're ice fishing. But ice fishing is a lot harder. Like if you catch 1 or 2 fish a day, the type of species I go for, that's a great day. So I'm not worried about the conservation side of it. But yeah, I use it all the time.
Love it. All right. Well, John, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this conversation, from AI to ice fishing, and I just truly appreciate the conversation. If you wouldn't mind, just tell our listeners where they can learn a little bit more about you and what you're working on at Allworth Financial.
Sure. So allworthfinancial.com is our website. I'm on LinkedIn. If anyone has questions, you can come directly to me. We love to talk to anyone in the industry that has ideas. And, we think that our company is going to continue to grow over the next, 60, 70 years. We're trying to build a 100-year company, not just a short-term company. So love any ideas or feedback.
Amazing. And be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack Podcast on all major podcasting platforms, and follow all things WealthStack on wealthmanagement.com, LinkedIn, and X. And if you want the in-person experience, join us at RIA Edge LA, October 7th and 8th. And we hope to see you there. Thank you all for tuning in.
Are you eager to discover C-level strategies aimed at accelerating RIA growth? Join us at RIA Edge Los Angeles, taking place at the Ritz-Carlton on October 7th and 8th. Register today by visiting riaedgela.com and save 10% with code WM2025.